I'm standing where in 2004 the Fern Creek Gully Landcare project started. In 2003 a understory fire went through the whole valley and burnt out the bitu, the lantana and lots of other weeds and cleared the site very nicely. In 2004 Jason Peters of Australian Eco Gardens introduced me to Jun19, who was then the director of Lake Macquarie Landcare. He made the fateful observation standing just here that before the coal mining in the 1920s, this would have all been rainforest. So I put my hand up and said, well, why don't we try to put it back? And that was the start of a 15-year project. We had fantastic help from Lake Macquarie Landcare, from Council, from Jill Hall, who was the then federal member for Shortland, Hunter Water, and from a host of friends who did all the weeding and all the planting. And now what we're looking at is a rainforest that's looking after itself, and when people come on the site who've never seen it before, they think it's remnant rainforest. So let's go and meet some of the boys who helped put it together.
Here we've planted a range of lower type plants, and the soil depth was such that you'd use a hoe like this and you'd have skeletal soil less than 100 millimetres thick. And eventually, I was very surprised that any of this took at all. But you can see some of the grasses establishing, and a few of the plants where I could find pockets of slightly deeper soil starting to pop up, so that this rocky slope is starting to be a lot of regrowth. Yeah.
Very, very bare. There was almost nothing growing here, and what was weeds. In some cases we're levering holes into the rocks to find places to put plants. This maidenhair fern, which is rampant now, was tiny little patches of it. The bungalows, when they were planted, it was largely rubbish and rocks and bits of timber that had accumulated in the creek. And since then, you can see they're now probably around 5-6 metres high. And it's when you go down into the gully, you get this real sense of a canopy starting to form, which is one of the things that really makes it have that rainforest feel.
I haven't done a lot of planting in my time, but it was my thought all the time was you've got various qualities of soil. Some of it's sandy, some of it's quite good loamy and so on, and lots of ground cover and mulch. But I kept thinking to myself, a lot of this won't survive. That's the nature of the game, right? But the thing is to just go on and plant. If only half of it survived, or even less, it's better than nothing, right? So, what we had to do was dig around, make sure we had a good spot. Some of it was, often you had to sort of root around a bit to find a better spot than the one you'd been given. And then put it in, water it, come back the same afternoon or the next morning, mulch it with cardboard. It was quite a process. But obviously it's more than half of it survived, quite a bit more than half. So I think we did well.
You can see these are about the same size, and these are the plants we planted, what I'd say about 3 years ago, wouldn't it be, Peter?
Something like that.
Probably, yeah, 3-5 years ago.
3 to 5 years ago, these were planted, and you'll see them in there and quite all around.
There's a pipe coming off the road, which is the head of the creek line. Back in 2005, we were good officers of council and Jill Hall. We got a Commonwealth Water grant to put in 60,000 litres worth of stormwater harvesting to provide backup water to ensure that we got essentially 95% survival rate of all the tube stock planting that we put in. This creek line was a serious erosion issue, and when we were doing the work on the stormwater harvesting, council came in and did their section of the creek line, which they had a reserve up at the top. Jason Peters, who was a horticulturalist, ran a little company called Eco Australian Gardens, came and did the rock wall through here to basically reduce the erosion when we got flooding rains coming through. It's worked quite effectively in terms of stopping down the erosion and allowing the water to spread out a little bit sideways, so that we've got here now, in about a 10-year period, 8 to 10 metres of rainforest growth above us. Within 5 years of the first planting of rainforest species, we started to get flowers and fruit. Those fruit dropped off, and then within another 3 years, we had second generation rainforest. In other words, 8 years after the first planting. Now above us, which will be a bit hard for you to see in any photography, is a 15-year-old Port Jackson fig, right, which is up at the top. And down here, we have one of its little babies growing in a classical Port Jackson fig way, in a crack in the rock, and it's going to end up in probably 10 or 15 years time being as big as its daddy.
Is this a weed?
No, that's not a weed. That's a splenium. That's a bird's nest fern. That's a native fern. And they typically grow on rocks or on trees. But these have come up. They've propagated themselves simply because we've created the environment. And originally, remember this rock? It was just dry, hard, no organic material whatsoever. And by creating this environment, planting these trees, they've just thrived.
When we started this project, we actually identified 16 remnant rainforest species on the site, one of which is this. It's probably about 70 years old, left over from the time when the coal mining was done. Down through this gully they had a timber raceway with little trolleys going up and down. But in the seed that's left in the soil, you've got these sorts of things coming up. And when we had in 2008 the big Category 1 cyclone come through Newcastle, and it dropped about 350 millimetres of rain in 3 days, we had rainforest species come up from the seed bank that had probably lain dormant there for about 70 years.
Okay, you don't have to be an expert to be a wonderful land carer and enjoy the company of experts such as Chris and Jason, and you end up being able to identify that this is a sweet pitostrum, which I've just been reminded was the name. Only 10 minutes earlier they'd mentioned it, and that's the sort of thing that you can gradually learn even if you're brain dead.
Was very bare before, and there's obviously a lot of regrowth. But one of the consequences of that, and one of the really important consequences, is that the habitats that we've established have allowed new species to come back into the area that would have existed before. And so we've got things like bowerbirds and little brown wrens and rufous fantails and fruit doves. There's just in here, there's a ringtail possum dray in the tree. Peter's seen a echidna wandering through the area, and it's fascinating because this area was so bare before, it's hard to believe most of those species would choose to be here because there was almost nothing in the way of food sources. But we've created all this. Well, we haven't. We've put the basic material in, and nature's recreated this. But we have provided this environment that has now allowed all those species to want to be here and probably find food in this area.
People think rainforest doesn't have flowers. Well, you're completely wrong. This is just one of the many examples of flowering rainforest trees.
Okay, see this beautiful little plant? Having created the conditions, this came up of its own accord. It's a tuckaroo, a native. This is the seed pod after it's opened, and as you can see, it's just exquisite. Beautiful plant, beautiful arrangement.
There for only 10 years, and I never liked gardening. And my wife has said, look, what are you doing up there? And I said, well, I've become an obsessive land carer and weed puller. And there's a demonstration. Even whilst we're having a recreational walk, I can't resist pulling up asparagus fern.
Especially with the nodules on the bottom. Look, we talk about the weeds that we have to deal with, some of which are even native. Now, these are called
Garcia, devil's twine.
Devil's twine. Devil's twine, and you can see a mass of it in. It's actually a native, so in one sense, it belongs in the forest. The only thing is, when we've planted the young plants, we have to try and get rid of it because it does strangulate them. And what happens is this vine has little suckers that grab onto the rest of the tree, and they take the nutrients away from the young trees. So once the trees are mature, it doesn't matter, it's part of the native part of the forest. But what we try and do is get rid of this on the young trees that we've recently planted, because you can see it can turn into a great mess.
The edge of Raya Park. Behind these trees is the playing field, and this is now council land. All of this has been planted about 8 years ago by Lake Macquarie Landcare with a team of about 30, and you see it's doing very, very well. Part of the reason why it's doing well is it gets all the water under heavy rain off Raya Park because it actually slopes this way, and the soil is a little bit richer because it was the topsoil pulled off when they actually made the playing field, right? But this is the northern extension of the rainforest development. We now have approximately a hectare of rainforest planted.
If you look down here to my left, that's the area we were looking at before, where the mine substances is. If you look in there, and we don't go in that area, it's actually too dangerous, but if you notice all the vegetation that's come up, as we've planted around and the other trees have grown up, it's now the native vegetation is coming back and it's stabilising that whole area, which is something just to be aware of. And we generally don't go there at all.
Before the fire in 2003, the whole of this face of this cliff line was covered in bitter bush. What it had done is made its own soil from its own leaf mulch. It was about 50 millimetres of pure black soil. When the fire came through, it went up the cliff face like a fire going up a chimney, burned it all off, and we've had no bitter bush on that cliff face ever since. So in some respects, sometimes the best way to start a land care project is with an understory control burn, which gets rid of the massive amount of weed, which then allows you to start again. I wouldn't have started this project except for that fire. That fire cleaned out the worst of the first version of clearing the weeds.
This is native swordgrass. This is a native plant that sort of occurs around this area, and actually it's quite widespread. And it forms this beautiful clumping habit with these beautiful seed heads. And it's a much better alternative to the pampas weed, which we have to deal with further down the valley.
Hi, my name's Chris. I've been involved with the Landcare group now for a few years, and over the last 12 months we've moved over to this area of the peninsula, and yeah, we've just been covering bidu and lantana and all sorts of things right down to the gully. So there's quite a number of us, and I quite enjoy coming every month. Like, it's a great group of people, and it's just great to sort of connect with the bush, yeah, every now and then, and just get in and be active, really. So yeah, I've really been enjoying it, and been really enjoying the results that we've been getting as well. Like this used to be lantana and bidu, like up above our heads only 6 months ago, and now we can see straight through, and we can see lots of regen coming back, natural regen, and yeah, it's a really good feeling.
So many of us have really busy lives. One of the things that I really love about coming to this landcare site is that I can stop, I can think, I can spend time with people who are really passionate about what they're doing, and I can also just rest my mind and be at one with nature, and also leave a better footprint on the earth than what it was when I came here.
Oh, hi, I'm Victoria, and I've been doing the landcare for about 12 months now, and basically I come for the exercise, so it's nice to be outdoors and doing something meaningful for exercise rather than standing on a treadmill. Plus the people are wonderful, and just have a positive output at the end. So over the last 12 months, we've cleared quite a lot of land. I'm today just doing steep slopes. We've gathered together the fitter people of the group. That's good at usually bushwalkers and things like that we've got good balance. So we're going to be doing a really, really steep parts that other people can't do. That's what's really good about the group. That doesn't matter what ability you have, that we will put you in a site that works well for you. So that's what we're up to at the moment.
Was very bare before, and there's obviously a lot of regrowth. But one of the consequences of that, and one of the really important consequences, is that the habitats that we've established have allowed new species to come back into the area that would have existed before. And so we've got things like bowerbirds and little brown wrens and rufous fantails and fruit doves. There's just in here, there's a ringtail possum dray in the tree. Peter's seen a echidna wandering through the area, and it's fascinating because this area was so bare before, it's hard to believe most of those species would choose to be here because there was almost nothing in the way of food sources. But we've created all this. Well, not we haven't. We've put the basic material in, and nature's recreated this. But we have provided this environment that has now allowed all those species to want to be here and probably find food in this area.